Are progressives bigots? No. Turn off the camera and move on. No. The answer to that is not complicated, but it's a little longer. Progressives are called bigots or intolerant of certain things a lot of the time. And I'm asking this question with no idea of what the right answer is. I don't think that progressives are bigoted when they're being progressive, which is me. I consider myself a progressive. I consider myself a leftist. I think progressive and leftist are more similar to me than other people who would define these terms. And the problem is that any of us can be bigoted, I think. Any, any, anybody. It's hard not to lapse into things that are, I think, better unsaid or that need some cleaning up after they're said. I would say this for conservatives too. I would say this for right wingers. I would say this for hardcore um, bigots that hate certain groups is that it's an error of verbiage and an error of thought. The problem is that words and thoughts can eventually shape your opinion. Even the mistakes you make in your words and thoughts, that's going to go crazy if I keep going in that direction. But what I'm saying is, I'm a progressive, and for intolerance of intolerance is one of the things that people criticize. I think people like me, people who have opinions like mine. And I'm riffing, improvising on this video because I need to know the answer and I need to think this through. I wish I had a larger audience because I could get a lot of feedback, but I know some of it would be crap from people who just want to harsh on progressives. Also, there's this sort of over self evaluation, overly self critical thing about some liberals and progressives and people on the left, where it's excessively checking um, your certainty, right? I really believe that we should be constantly checking our certainty. But when I say constantly, I mean that in a soft way. Sometimes you have to stand up and say your beliefs, articulate them out loud, and you're going to get some errors there. You're going to make some communication mistakes there. No book is without a flaw. No song is without a flaw. No masterpiece of any kind of art, communication, or technology is without a flaw, right? And I think maybe that's where, for me, the leftist area stands for, because now it probably is that I have my own definition of leftist. Um, my own definition of leftist is a lot of the aspects of leftism are similar throughout the centuries. And I'm thinking the left ideology and ideas and preferred practices have probably been around since before we had the term the left. For example, I said this in another video, but there's a part of the Bible where the apostles are just a bunch of communists, and it's a totalitarian kind of communism because God strikes people down who forget or decide not to give the proceeds of the sales of their houses to the collective. They give a little bit, but they don't give the whole thing, and God strikes them down. um, but then again, I don't believe in such a thing as a totalitarian dictator, even a totalitarian dictator of the universe. So I think that this is kind of that's another problem about leftism, is that what's happened is leftist ideals end up being pretty attractive at some points in history, but then a very clever, power hungry person often comes in and says, I'll lead this for all of us so it's a lot more organized. But communism can't happen with a single leader. Communism is communal. It's using the wisdom of all people in the group to create decisions, to create group decisions. Other people might say it's not, but that's what I say it is. But it's not really that kind of progressive value I'm talking about. That kind of progressive value is talking about methods that we can solve poverty and classism and inequality and some people not getting access to critical things that other people never have to worry about, right? It's about extreme economic inequality and also cultural inequality, where some people are marginalized and thought of as, let's say in my country, not American, right? Um, and are not American enough or not playing the game the right way, right? So, but what was I about to tell myself? I was about to tell you and myself that, let's see if this will help. Un, un vaso de café, una taza de café. All right, that's Spanish. Um, it's the intolerance, the difficulty we have with people who want to do genocide. I think that's what gets the left in trouble, actually. We have this thing against genocide. We don't like it when it's happening. We don't like it after it happened. And we don't like all the buildup to it. We have this prejudice against things that look like they're inching toward genocide of a certain population. As we found out in previous genocides, it could be anybody. I was just listening to the fact that in Rwanda, they had to go kill all the taller people because the British turned the taller people into the powerful people and took all the shorter, darker skinned people and put them in less power. And so these guys controlled the the levers of society by being put in places, and these people were put in no place. And we do that here in the United States. So, usually, though, I think the genocides are committed by people who feel disempowered but who are very powerful. I think a lot of genocides look like civil wars because somebody's trying to hurt somebody, and then people fight back to defend themselves, and it just gets ugly for years and years and years and years. Civil wars, like I said in another video, don't happen like the American Civil War, where there are two sides and somebody wins, after a while. So that's where I think progressives really fail. We're just too sensitive to the next genocide. However, um, I would say like if this is too sensitive to the next genocide. I'm being a little sarcastic about saying that. If this much sensitivity, taking up almost the whole screen, is too much sensitivity, this is just about enough sensitivity and worry and concern about the next genocide. I mean, we should learn to relax. But we're not the only ones going off half cocked all the time. Conservatives are constantly going off half cocked. And so are far right people, far right wing people, and so are whatever evangelical Christians are. And so, see, I'm taking a side here, but I'm taking a side because I'm trying to self criticize too. I think that people like me don't know how to talk about these complex issues good enough to satisfy everyone. And there are a lot of people out there that are probably maybe, I'm not going to say impossible to satisfy, you know, um, but since I'm not a real big believer in like picking up pitchforks or guns and going after people for idealistic reasons or for reasons to reorganize the government, I have to use words. And I think a lot of progressives are that way. They might have weapons, but they're going to use words to prevent any need to pick up weapons and all that stuff. We don't want to, in my opinion, everybody that I know that's got a progressive stint to them, we don't want anybody rounded up. We don't want to take all the conservatives. We don't want to take all the Klan. We don't want to take all the Nazis in America and round them up. You know, it's a matter of ideas and ideology, right? Now, if somebody goes and commits a crime in our country, and you're going to enforce it when somebody else commits such a crime, you got to enforce it when the right wingers commit a crime too. So the attack on the Capitol, you're not supposed to attack capitals, as far as I think that's what they taught me in kindergarten. So I think I'm making several important points, but I'm not staying on a through line to make the one point that we leftists, I'm going to make this claim for anybody I would call a leftist, isn't wanting to pick up arms and defeat the bad guys before the bad guys do their bad things. I think we are so irritating because we like to shout out our beliefs everywhere we can, or we like to gently articulate them when we think it might help. So when I hear somebody talking about like a trans person in a way that I don't think is helpful or nice or accepting, I try to explain that there is a person over there who is part of a group that has to stay in the shadows for years. And now, when they start poking their heads out of the shadows, they get beat down. And then the other part of it is I try to explain that there's a lot of like scientific methodology that's been vetted throughout the years that is now starting to validate the medical practices that are being used to help trans people. I don't want to harp on that too much because then I'm going to just go off on like a tangent. But it's the same when you talk about like poor people and you try to blame them for the their poverty. And as a kid, I was told that that was wrong, right? So it was basically an assumption just because kids get told things by adults, and sometimes kids believe it. Just like when I was told there was a God, um, I believed it, but I'm a questioning person. Ultimately, I became a disbeliever of God. But before that, God was my progressive pilot, and I was God's co-pilot. God was telling me to be progressive back in the day. So I've spent lots of time questioning my progressive beliefs. This may sound silly because I know progressives can join the Marines, but I joined the military partly to challenge all of these assumptions I've made about violence and my worship of nonviolence, like I worship Gandhi's supposed nonviolence and Martin Luther King's supposed nonviolence. Now, when I say supposed nonviolence, I don't mean that they were wrong, that they were being violent. I'm saying that my ideas of nonviolence were in a fantasy land. I had, but I've always had something that I think people could call progressive or leftist values. I call them compassionate values, although I understand that conservatives would say holding people's feet to the fire for being responsible for what they're supposed to do for their lives to make them better is the best medicine. I just believe that actually real observation and data gathering invalidates that point of view. Responsibility is probably, how do I say this? It's a double-edged sword, I guess. Responsibility can paralyze, um, and I'm not explaining that very well. I have a problem with the word responsibility. It makes it sound like if people would have done certain things, they would have gotten what they needed. But time and time again, we see it doesn't work that way. What's correlated most with people's success is not their effort and not their intelligence. It's like how much money they started with and what kind of connections they have, and that kind of thing. And you can look that up, and please tell me if I'm wrong because I'll keep looking this stuff up. Um, so yes, I think the answer is we progressives cause our own problems because we know what we don't like is the most intolerant of intolerant people. We know we don't like people who are willing to have the government push an entire culture underground. Like let's say people thought there's too much Mexican food in our country. That when did we allow this to take over? And have a policy where Mexican food cannot be cooked in public. that literally could happen, even in our government in the United States. And that would be a form of a cultural oppression. You don't let people make food that people like, or food that people dislike. Who gives a damn? But you don't let them try to sell something they want to sell. That's problematic in so many ways. I don't know how I feel about selling drugs. Actually, we'll get to that topic some other time. Yeah, I should do one video on that. Try to remind me to do that next week. So I keep losing sight of the fact that me and progressives and leftists, we get ourselves in trouble by not realizing that there has to be strategy and there has to be the kind of bluntness that we claim for ourselves. So, for example, when I say that giving a universal basic income has a lot of promise for lifting many people out of poverty and decreasing probably things like depression and anxiety in our country, or when I say that housing first initiatives are showing a lot of promise for lifting people out of the streets, being the way or a way to lift people further and further up. Like that's the lowest platform we can let people be in is pre-homelessness. We never should let people get to homelessness unless they voluntarily run out of their houses, which does happen. People who can live in a home with a friend or can be supplied public housing, a lot of them, there are mental health issues and they wind up running down the streets and stuff like that because of whatever is going on. This I got from a person who was working for Housing First and doing counseling there, and they'd have to track them down because they had a lot of problems with perception and all that stuff. Um, so, for me to talk about that as something I know, I always have to be a little skeptical. That's my name, Skeptical Spectrum. I always have to be a little, and I also am a spectacle, and I'm also a spectrum, whatever that means. I have to watch out for the idea that I'm going to be mad at someone for believing something that is dangerous and that can lead them to dangerous action. I have to be very careful at being angry at them for that. I also have to be very careful at about basically how I deal with the worst of the worst people, so to speak, from a leftist point of view. And that is, we could have people with antisocial personality disorder that we're dealing with. We could be dealing with people who have been caught up in a fever and are willing to go down and do a counter protest where they're literally planning to crack skulls and literally follow through on cracking skulls, right? I can have my rage as an emotion, but this is advice not just for progressives, but also anti-progressives, I guess. Um, the anger is real and valid, and you gotta honor the anger. That doesn't mean you take your anger and punch somebody. You punch somebody if it's going to prevent them from harming someone they're trying to harm. And that's a difficult decision to make. Imagine if you walked into a house and two people were fighting. Which one would you grab? I think the answer is whoever you need to grab to kind of protect both of them because you don't know who initiated it or who is going to be the one that won't give up and try to harm the other person. You will learn by intervening who is the one that is really the instigator and the one who wants to continue hurting someone. People come by their stupid beliefs honestly. They come by their hateful beliefs honestly. They come by their evil beliefs honestly. They come by their violent beliefs honestly. Because they were all born as little babies who had some predetermined, tendencies inside of them partly from genetics and the way their biology had developed before they got out of the womb, but also because of their experiences in the womb. A lot of those tendencies are shaped in the womb. And so the thing is, they are doing, unfortunately, the best job they can. You know, imagine a guy that gets, imagine right wing, hate filled people who are constantly trying to make the good guys into the enemy, which is me. I believe I'm a good guy. They imagine here's a sort of metaphor for that kind of activity. Let's say you're on a plane and you're sitting next to the exit, and then you see a guy walk up and he's looking kind of funny. He's like kind of like got this expression on his face, and he keeps doing this. And he's stumbling toward that exit. And the airplane's high up in the air. This happened in the news a few weeks ago, and it's happened before. And I was scared to death. Some dude was holding onto the handle on an airplane I was in years ago. If I would have known that somebody could do that, I would have started screaming and telling the people. But the guy didn't do it. I didn't say anything to the flight attendants or anything because I just thought that he was drunk too. So anyway, this happened recently. Guy walks up there, he opens it. I forget if he flies out or not, or if anybody got hurt, but he opens the thing up in the air, and the plane winds up being safely landed. Um, Terrifying, dangerous, bad things could have happened. The pilot theoretically could have lost control of the plane, and a crash could have happened, right? That's bad. That's evil. That's my analogy for all of the bigots that are violent bigots who are genocide minded, right? They're all over the place. That's a real thing. But they came by that innocently. They have problems and they're trying to solve problems, but they also have other problems that make them perceive that something's a problem that isn't a problem. And it makes it difficult for them to find the right strategies to solve their problems. And when this turns into a group activity where people start to have a common language and a target for their blame of their life problems, um, that's when it gets very dangerous. So the the strategy to decrease the danger might be something like you tackle that guy that is going to open the who just opened or who is going to open the emergency exit on the plane that's flying up in the air. Yeah, but you don't necessarily continue to hate that guy because that's not what's going on. The problem is ideas. The problem is ideas in the head. It's not just ideas in the head. It's also how your head is functioning. Because your head is ready to gather a tribe around it or a group of friends or a community around it. And that's all becomes sort of an echo chamber. There are lots of problems that happen here that I guess if we leftists get too passionate to the point where we're forgetting that strategies are what matter. And a lot of these are communication strategies, but a lot of them are all other kinds of strategies. That we can accidentally lapse into being the bad guy. Absolutely, we can. I just don't think that's what's happening in the current narrative. There are probably some leftists that want to go beat up some bigot that's calling for the eradication of trans people. But you almost apparently never see that really happen and rarely happen, right? Um, so, so my answer to is are leftists bigots? I would say, yeah, leftists can be bigots. People who self-identify as leftist can be bigots. But when they're being bigots, they're not thinking in leftist ways. When they're acting out bigotry, they're not acting out in leftist ways. It's like a tightrope. A lot of us are not good enough at walking on that tightrope. It's very hard, and actually, maybe it's too much to ask. So when we screw up and we do our starting to sound like, let's eradicate all right wing bigots, right? That's not the right strategy. I don't mind eradicating all right wing bigotry if that's possible. I don't think it's possible. I think at a very mild level, some of the tribalism and some of the sort of wanting things not to change too fast is understood. You know what I mean? So I can understand conservatism. I can understand some of the values of, like, I like my homeland to be our homeland. The problem is no one's homeland was their homeland to begin with and will continue to be their homeland forever. Just life doesn't work that way. So I think leftists are correct. But we have to realize that if if our job is to disarm people, I think that means to show them why they're safe and talk to them about what is in everybody's best interests. I think that tribalism is so strong that people work against their own self interest to defend their position in the tribe and to defend the tribe they have a position in. And that means ultimately we're going to have to hurt another tribe, which means a massive group of people because they are a threat to us, right? But if we're going to be, I think, whoever's a leftist out there, a good leftist, we're going to have to realize that they're working out of basic human drives and that they didn't get up, they didn't come out of the womb saying, you know what I want to do? I want to be a murderous jerk, you know. Um, and to make them feel safe is a tightrope walk. But I think it is the job of us to try to do that. Now, when things go too far, I think, yes, it's time to use the legal system and whatever we have else to enforce, um, you know, people breaking laws and people doing things that should be illegal that harm people. Because usually the right wing will be oppressing a vulnerable group, and they'll even like recruit vulnerable right wing thinkers into their group to hurt other vulnerable people. I think that's the problem. I think what leftist people want to do is they want to take the powerless and bring them all together so that there's a more equalized level of power among all persons in the world population. So it's like sitting around a community of equals, trying to find solutions for everybody involved. Um, People have started to swallow the what do you call that thing? The superstition that we can't treat everybody equally and provide for everybody equally. The one thing that I think I know as a leftist is we haven't really tried. It's like I said, it's always been co-opted by a totalitarian. But also, the, we have to decide. We have to decide what's causing the inequality. And the inequality is partly just a fact of nature, but the other part of it is we have been shaped by nature to solve problems like this. And so, if there's a way to get the right winger on your side, that's what you do. You show them what's in it for them. Okay, so cold, rational, what's in it for me, I think is the way that leftists should be thinking when they're thinking about their opponents.